President Biden took an active role in laying out diplomatic cover for Israel to launch a medieval siege of Gaza. Using the office of United States presidency, he first amplified a fake and shocking story about the 40 beheaded babies that came to serve as justification for Israel's impending collective punishment of Palestinians.
I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children.
White House later retracted the statement and published this correction. U.S. official and the president have not seen pictures nor confirmed such reports independently.
When the death count of Palestinians began to send shockwaves throughout the world and Israel was feeling the heat, again, using his White House podium, the president poured cold water over the shocking death figures, thereby greenlighting Israel that they could continue with the industrial slaughter.
I'm sure innocents have been killed, and it's the price of waging a war, but I have no confidence in the number that the Palestinians are using.
Here's a likely explanation. During his 36 years in the Senate, Biden was the chamber's biggest recipient in history of donations from pro-Israeli groups, taking in $4.2 million, according to Open Secrets database. Any discussion around American foreign policy is unintelligible without what's been called by Representative Brad Sherman, quote, the single most important organization in promoting the US-Israel alliance, with 100,000 members and, quote, a vast pool of donors.
Before AIPAC, the American-Israeli Political Action Committee,
is one of the most powerful lobbying groups in the US which advocates pro-Israel policies.
Groups like AIPAC exert influence inside the Beltway by helping get allies appointed to key positions in the government and by giving politicians clear incentives to adopt positions that they favor. For example, by steering campaign contributions towards pro-Israel candidates and away from candidates who aren't. And that's why Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert said AIPAC was, quote, the greatest supporter and friend we have in the whole world.
It certainly is not a cabal or a conspiracy that, quote unquote, controls U.S. foreign policy. Rather, it's a powerful interest group like the NRA, and it operates pretty much the same way those other interest groups do. Very importantly, the lobby is not synonymous with Jewish Americans.
Founded by a former government official of the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Isaiah L. Keenan, AIPAC has been accused of acting as an agent of the Israeli government. So it is not a surprise to learn that American Jewish leaders often consult Israeli officials to make sure that their actions advance Israeli goals. As one activist from a major Jewish organization wrote, quote, it is routine for us to say, quote, this is our policy on a certain issue, but we must check what the Israelis think. We as a community do it all the time. In 2005, Lawrence Franklin, a Pentagon analyst, pleaded guilty to espionage charges of passing US government secrets to AIPAC policy director Steve J. Rosen and AIPAC senior Iran analyst Keith Weissman in what is known as the AIPAC espionage scandal. From 2021 to 2022, AIPAC contributed the highest amount among all pro-Israel lobby donors at over $23 million to Congress. This rises to almost $31 million if you include all candidates running for office. The Democrats received just over $21 million and the Republicans nearly $11 million. On Thursday, October the 12th, 2023, the 71st United States Secretary of State said,
you may be strong enough on your own to defend yourself, but as long as America exists, you will never ever have to. We will always be there by your side.
The question on all reasonable people's minds ought to be, why is a Secretary of State of an independent sovereign nation like the United States of America committed to the security of another nation, even when it's at the expense of making Americans less safe?
Finally, we argue that the lobby has pushed policies that are in neither Israel's or America's national interest. In particular, we maintain that it would have been much better for both countries if the United States had long ago pressured Israel to stop building settlements and allow for the creation of a viable Palestinian state. But this did not happen, and it will not happen, because the lobby makes it impossible for American leaders to use the leverage at their disposal to pressure Israel. In a nutshell, our argument is that the lobby, working with Israel itself, has pushed U.S. Middle East policy in ways that are not in the American national interest, and I might add, not in Israel's interest either. In fact, giving Israel nearly unconditional support is one of the reasons we have a terrorism problem.
The answer to that question is largely answered by the influence of big money from donors.
That there is a powerful lobby out there, and that it influences U.S. Middle East policy in profound ways.
Antony Blinken continues the US policy of unconditional aid to Israel, approximately $3.8 billion in its security assistance annually. Since 1982, the US has vetoed 32 Security Council resolutions critical of Israel, and under Secretary of State Blinken, it has been no different. This pattern of uncritical support continues almost uniformly, whatever the administration and Congress make up.
If Iran or its proxies attack U.S. personnel anywhere, make no mistake, we will defend our people.
And it becomes clear why when we open the books. With the eruption of the current crisis, neocon Lindsey Graham has been uniquely vociferous of Israel's arch nemesis.
We're here today to tell Iran we're watching you. If this war grows, it's coming to your backyard.
Taking out Iran is, of course, one of the principal goals of the neocon wing of the Israel lobby. According to Open Secrets, Lindsey Graham has been in receipt of $1,007,580 from the pro-Israel lobby. Former US Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley, running for the 2024 presidential nominee, has also come out flying the Israeli flag, equally deploying one of Israel lobby's key talking points.
This is not just an attack on Israel, this is an attack on America, because they hate us just as much.
Again, when we open the books, the likely motivation for her political grandstanding becomes clear. According to Reuters, Israeli billionaire, Zionist and mega Republican donor Miriam Adelson, quote, met with Haley in Las Vegas, end quote. Haley has raised roughly $8.2 million between July and September. A 2021 Politico article reads about her deceased husband, Sheldon Adelson, quote, the singular intensity of Adelson's giving, which was focused on the US-Israel relationship. According to John Mearsheimer, AIPAC has, quote, a somewhat unique model that often begins donating early in careers of politicians with, quote, long-term promise.
So from very early on, the vetting process begins, even before people are running for Congress, and also opportunities are provided, such as trips to Israel. So the attempt to socialize people who are perceived even as potential candidates for running for Congress begins at a very early age from the perspective of some of these groups, including that of AIPAC.
Mearsheimer explains this further, quote, another source of the lobby's power is its use of pro-Israel congressional staffers, as Maurice Amite, a former head of AIPAC, once admitted, quote, there are a lot of guys at the working level up here, on Capitol Hill, who happen to be Jewish, who are willing to look at certain issues in terms of their Jewishness. These are all guys who are in a position to make the decision in these areas for those senators. You can get an awful lot done just at the staff level. An enduring principle of the Israel lobby has been to hold sway over the US State Department and the Foreign Affairs Departments. For obvious reasons, it's where Israel policy is made. Quote, the thrust of US policy in the region derives almost entirely from domestic politics, and especially the activities of the, quote, Israel lobby.
And so, if you have the time, look very carefully to see which individuals have served over time as the chairs or the ranking members and so forth of the committee and subcommittee in foreign policy and appropriations, and you'll tend to see people who are coming from, very hardcore, dark blue Jewish American districts in the country, or people that are coming from evangelical backgrounds, or people that are security hawks, and so they tend to be clustered in these committees and subcommittees of foreign policy and appropriations in a way that's very important.
In the United States Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, which leads foreign policy legislation, the current chair is Senator Ben Cardin. The Israel lobby has funneled $913,485 to him. Previously, the chair was Senator Bob Menendez, who would receive $2,433,147 from the Israel lobby. Another crucial component of the US foreign policy regime is the United States House Committee on Foreign Affairs, which has jurisdiction over bills and investigations. Its current chair is Michael McCaul. In the 2020 election cycle, he received an undisclosed amount from pro-Israel America PAC. Meanwhile, the Subcommittee for Middle East, North Africa and International Terrorism is headed up by Ted Deutsch. From 2019 to 2020, he received $132,665 from the pro-Israel lobby. The pattern is clear. Ambitious people either with ideological sympathies to Israel or can be swayed by incentives are backed by the Israel lobby all the way to the top, where Israel policy is made.
Various pro-Israel watchdog groups monitor media coverage, organize boycotts and demonstrations against news agencies that publish or broadcast anything critical of Israel. And there's numerous examples of this taking place.
And we have seen many such examples of late.
New York Times writer resigns after reprimand for open letter declaring Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Columbia University is suspending Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voice for Peace.
A Palestinian-American teacher in Austin, Texas, has filed a federal lawsuit for losing her job as a speech pathologist after refusing to sign a pro-Israel oath.
Harvard's Kennedy School of Government is facing growing outcry for rescinding a fellowship for the former head of Human Rights Watch, Kenneth Roth, over his criticism and the group's criticism of Israel's human rights record.
I was on a phone call with a senior leader at Global to be told I'm fired for everything I've been posting.
$5,000 is what I was just offered to pledge my support to Israel.
Last week, a CNN contributor, a commentator the network had on its payroll, delivered a speech at the United Nations in support of Palestinian self-determination and equal rights. Less than 24 hours later, CNN was done with Mark Lamont Hill.
That MSNBC has quietly taken 3 of its Muslim broadcasters out of the anchor's chair.
Due in large part to the lobby, the US has been willing to set aside its own security and that of many of its allies to advance the interests of Israel. Since the October War in 1973, Washington has provided Israel with a level of support dwarfing that given to any other state. Emboldened by this exceptionalism, Israel has always thought it can kill, divide and assassinate its way through the Palestinian problem. To that end, according to Human Rights Watch, quote, Israeli authorities have dispossessed, confined, forcibly separated and subjugated Palestinians by virtue of their identity to varying degrees of intensity. In certain areas, as described in their report, quote, these deprivations are so severe that they amount to the crimes against humanity of apartheid and persecution. With the US still not conditioning aid to prevent settlement expansions, unilaterally moving their embassy to Jerusalem and putting their diplomatic muscle behind the disastrous so-called Abraham Peace Accords, a two-state solution has all but vanished. The single-minded policy of the lobby to destroy all hope of a Palestinian state hasn't just been dangerous for Palestinians. As the shocking events of October 7th have proven, Israelis aren't insulated from the fallout of the occupation either. Hamas is responsible for the death and destruction it wrought on 7th of October. But as the Secretary General of the UN said,
it is important to also recognize the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. The Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation.
With extremist settlers forming the backbone of Netanyahu's ruling government, provoking Palestinians at their holiest sites during their holiest months, confident and secured by American muscle, it was always going to end like this. And so we see it culminate in the horror show we witness today. Hamas, war crimes of 1,400 Israelis killed and held hostage, and the war crime of collective punishment and ethnic cleansing by the Israelis on the Palestinians, whereby over 10,000 civilians and over 5,000 children have been slaughtered.
I feel quite confident as a human rights lawyer in saying that what I see unfolding in Gaza and beyond is genocide.
Nobody knows when this human catastrophe will end. But what's certain is, the Israel lobby is a major roadblock to any peace.